Frank Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with a worn cloth as he watched his 12-year-old daughter Emma arrange her homework on the small table in the corner of Mitchell's Auto Repair. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor where Emma had learned to do her math problems between the sounds of air wrenches and diagnostic computers. At 54, Frank's silver beard and weathered hands told the story of a man who had worked with engines his entire life. What they didn't reveal was that 20 years ago, those same hands had gripped the steering wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car, racing at speeds that most people could barely imagine. "Dad, Mrs. Peterson called again about the rent," Emma said quietly, not looking up from her algebra worksheet. "She said if we don't have it by Friday, we might have to find somewhere else to live." Frank felt the familiar knot tighten in his stomach. Since losing his job at the Ford dealership 6 months ago, he had been scraping together work wherever he could find it. Mitchell's shop let him use the bay in exchange for helping with overflow repairs, but it wasn't enough to cover their modest apartment rent and Emma's expenses. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart," Frank said, forcing a confidence he didn't feel. "Something will work out." That's when the silver BMW Z8 pulled into the garage, its engine making an irregular clicking sound that Frank immediately recognized as a timing chain issue. The woman who stepped out of the driver's seat looked like she belonged in a boardroom rather than an auto shop, wearing an immaculate cream-colored business suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Victoria Chang surveyed the garage with the careful eye of someone accustomed to high-end establishments. At 38, she was the regional director for a major investment firm, and her car was both her pride and her daily necessity for visiting clients across the state. "Excuse me," she called to Frank, who was the only person visible in the shop. "I need someone to look at my car. It's making a noise that started this morning. And I have important meetings this week." Frank wiped his hands again and approached the BMW, immediately noting the sophisticated engineering under the hood. "I'd be happy to take a look, but I should mention that I'm just helping out here today. The shop owner is at lunch, and I'm not sure about the pricing structure for foreign imports." Victoria checked her watch, clearly frustrated. "How long would it take you to diagnose the problem?" "I really can't afford to have this car out of commission." Frank popped the hood and listened to the engine for 30 seconds. His trained ear, honed by decades of racing experience, immediately identified the issue. "It's your timing chain tensioner. The chain has stretched, and if you keep driving it, you're looking at major engine damage." "How major?" Victoria asked, though the answer was written on her face. "Could be 15 to 20,000 in repairs if the timing jumps and damages the valves," Frank said honestly. "But caught now, it's maybe 3,000 to fix properly." Victoria's shoulders sagged. She had been dreading exactly this kind of expensive surprise. "I suppose I don't have much choice. When could you get to it?" Frank looked around the empty shop, then at Emma doing homework in the corner. "Ma'am, I'll be straight with you. I'm between jobs right now, and while I know I can fix your car right, I can't guarantee when the shop owner will be back to approve the work or handle the business side of things." Victoria studied Frank's face, noting the honesty in his eyes and the way his gaze drifted protectively toward the young girl in the corner. Something about his straightforward manner and obvious competence made her trust him instinctively. "What if we work something out directly?" she found herself saying. "I can see you know what you're talking about, and I need someone I can trust with this car. I appreciate that, but I couldn't take on a job this size without proper shop insurance, and what if I paid for the parts and you did the labor?" Victoria interrupted. "I'll take the risk on the warranty. I just need someone who won't take advantage of the situation." Frank hesitated, knowing he needed the work but also knowing the ethical complications. "Ma'am, that's generous, but a job like this, done right, would take me the better part of 3 days. I can't ask you to pay me what that's worth when you don't even know my qualifications." Emma looked up from her homework, having overheard the conversation. "Dad, tell her about the racing." "Emma," Frank said quietly, a warning in his voice. But Victoria's curiosity was piqued. "Racing?" Frank shot his daughter a look that was both loving and exasperated. "It's not relevant to your car troubles, miss." "My name is Victoria," she said, extending her hand. and I'm curious about anything that might give me confidence in your ability to handle a high-performance engine." After a long pause, Frank spoke reluctantly. "I used to race professionally, worked as a mechanic on NASCAR teams for 15 years, then drove Cup Series cars for 8 seasons." Victoria's eyes widened. "You were a NASCAR driver?" "Was being the key phrase," Frank said. "Had a bad crash in 2003, broke my back, and that was the end of that career. Been working on regular cars ever since." "What was your name in racing?" Victoria asked, though something about Frank's demeanor suggested this wasn't a topic he enjoyed discussing. "Frank Morrison," he said simply. "Though I doubt you'd remember. I wasn't one of the big names." Victoria pulled out her phone and quickly searched. What she found made her breath catch. Frank Morrison had been more than just a driver. He had been considered one of the most promising talents of his generation before his career-ending accident. Multiple race wins, consistently top 10 finishes, and respect throughout the racing community. "You won the Southern 500, she said, looking at her phone in amazement. "Twice," Frank nodded uncomfortably. "Different life. These days, I'm just a guy trying to pay rent and take care of his daughter." Emma had been listening to the conversation with growing pride in her father. "Dad's the best mechanic in the whole city," she announced. "He can fix anything." Victoria looked from Frank to Emma, then back at the BMW with its open hood. Something about this situation felt like more than mere coincidence. Here was a man with world-class automotive expertise, struggling to make ends meet, while she desperately needed someone she could trust with her important and expensive car. "Frank," she said slowly, "what if I propose something different?" "I'm listening." "Fix my car, and I'll pay you fairly for the work. But more than that, I'd like to help you get back on your feet properly. I work in finance, and I have connections throughout the business community. Someone with your background and expertise shouldn't be worrying about rent money." Frank's pride bristled slightly. "Ma'am, I appreciate the kindness, but I'm not looking for charity." "I'm not offering charity," Victoria said firmly. "I'm offering opportunity. But first, show me what you can do with my car." Over the next 3 days, Victoria found herself returning to the shop each evening to check on the progress. What she discovered was a master craftsman at work. Frank didn't just fix the timing chain. He methodically went through the entire engine, identifying and addressing small issues that could become major problems later. More importantly, she got to know Emma, a bright, resilient girl who had clearly inherited her father's mechanical aptitude and possessed a wisdom beyond her years. "My dad used to be famous," Emma confided on the second evening while Frank was focused on the engine. "People would ask for his autograph and everything. But he says that stuff doesn't matter anymore because all that matters is taking care of me." Victoria felt her heart tighten at the obvious love and sacrifice in Frank's life choices. "Your dad sounds like a very good man." "He is," Emma said seriously. "He just gets sad sometimes because he thinks he can't give me the stuff other kids have. But I don't care about that stuff. I just want him to be happy." That evening, Victoria made a phone call to her brother-in-law, who owned a chain of high-end automotive service centers specializing in luxury and exotic cars. The conversation led to another call and then another, as Victoria began to understand the full scope of Frank's background and reputation in the racing world. What she learned astounded her. Frank Morrison wasn't just a former NASCAR driver. He was considered one of the most gifted mechanics and engineers in racing history. His setups and innovations had been legendary, and his post-crash disappearance from the sport had been noted by many as a genuine loss to the racing community. On Friday morning, when Frank finished the BMW repair, Victoria arrived with more than just payment for his services. "Frank, I have a proposition for you," she said as he wiped down the engine bay one final time. "I'm listening," Frank replied, though his focus was on ensuring every detail of the repair was perfect. "My brother-in-law owns Precision Automotive, 6 locations specializing in high-performance and exotic car service. He's been looking for someone to head up his new location, someone with the expertise to handle the most challenging work and train other mechanics." Frank looked up from the engine. "That's flattering, but I'm not sure I'm what he's looking for." "Actually, you're exactly what he's looking for. I sent him your racing background, and he about fell out of his chair. Apparently, your reputation in the racing world is still pretty impressive." Emma had been listening from her homework corner, and now she approached excitedly. "Dad, does that mean we wouldn't have to worry about rent anymore?" Victoria smiled at Emma's directness. "It means your dad would be managing a state-of-the-art facility, working on cars that would challenge his skills, and earning enough to give you both the stability you deserve." Frank was quiet for a long moment, looking at his daughter's hopeful face. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Victoria replied. "Just an opportunity for someone with your talents to use them in an environment that values expertise over politics. And you're doing this because?" Victoria considered her answer carefully. "Because sometimes we encounter people who remind us what real character looks like. You could have overcharged me, done substandard work, or tried to take advantage of my situation. Instead, you treated my car like it was your own and charged me fairly for work that probably saved me $15,000. She paused, looking around the modest shop, but mostly because Emma told me her greatest wish is for her dad to be happy. I figure a man who inspires that kind of love from his daughter deserves a chance to show the world what he's capable of." 6 months later, Frank stood in the pristine service bay of Precision Automotive's newest location, watching his team of technicians work on a collection of exotic cars that would have been unimaginable to him a year earlier. His expertise was in high demand, and word had spread through the racing community that Frank Morrison was back in the game. Emma had her own desk in the office area, where she did homework surrounded by automotive magazines and pictures of the cars her father worked on. Her math grades had improved dramatically since she no longer had to worry about whether they'd have a place to live next month. "Dad," Emma said one afternoon as they drove home in the certified pre-owned BMW that Frank had purchased with his first bonus, "are you happy now?" Frank smiled, thinking about the question that had launched this entire journey. "You know what, sweetheart? I think I am. But not because of the job or the car or any of that." "Then why?" "Because I remembered that hiding your talents doesn't protect you from life's challenges. It just prevents you from using those talents to build something better." Victoria still brought her BMW to Frank's shop for service, though it barely needed any work these days. Their friendship had grown into something deeper, based on mutual respect and shared values about the importance of family and authentic character. "You know," Victoria said during one of her visits, "I never properly thanked you for what you taught me." "What did I teach you?" Frank asked, genuinely puzzled. "That expertise and humility aren't contradictory. That someone can be incredibly skilled without being arrogant about it. And that sometimes the most valuable people are the ones who aren't trying to impress anyone." Frank smiled, thinking about the journey from that first desperate day in Mitchell's shop to this moment of stability and hope. "I learned something too." "What's that?" "That sometimes when you think your racing days are over, you're just getting ready for a different kind of race. One where the finish line isn't about crossing first, but about crossing together." And as Emma laughed at something on her phone while surrounded by the organized chaos of a thriving automotive business, Frank realized that he had indeed found his way back to victory lane. It just looked different than he had ever imagined. If this story inspired you to believe that it's never too late for a comeback and that authentic expertise always finds its way to recognition, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to remember that their best days might still be ahead of them. Subscribe for more stories about second chances and hidden talents, and let us know in the comments about a time when someone's skill or character surprised you. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places.